welcome to another show on Africa. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. This week on the show, we discuss rights and responsibilities. We have an incredible panel with us. We also get your views on the issues, and we have Africa's top 10. You're watching the Africa Leadership Dialogues. I'm Julie Gichuru. On the show this week, we focus on the critical issues of rights and responsibilities. Our panelists: Father Gabriel Dolan is a priest, a columnist, a human rights defender as well. He's an Irish citizen who's been resident in Kenya for 31 years. Dr. Steve Ouma is a scholar, an advisor and an activist in the field of human rights and social anthropology, with over 15 years working in diverse international, regional and national fora. Irungu Houghton is a senior management professional specializing in areas of public policy, advocacy and institutional strengthening. He's a senior advisor at the Society for International Development's Regional Office for East and Southern Africa. Gentlemen, welcome to Africa Leadership Dialogues. Let's start first by perhaps defining rights versus responsibilities. I'll start with you, Steve. What are your thoughts on how these interplay together, and how would you define them?
Well, first, the idea of rights has an older tradition conceptually, centered on claim making, not necessarily human rights alone, but also issues like right to property and right to many other things like environmental rights, issues around right to associate, right to be private and so on. But then, because rights are essentially political in the way they are produced and they are practiced, to sort of leverage the issue of responsibility has emerged increasingly side by side with the history of right, because for me to enjoy a right, then somebody else must recognize that right. Mm-hmm. So then rights and responsibility then have formed two sides almost of the same coin. So you claim rights, but you also have a responsibility, or for you to claim rights, you must act in a particular way for you to get that entitlement. However, over time again, those in authority have sometimes used that idea of responsibility to delete
their own responsibility
and the claims of rights. So, for example, you had in Kenya at some point where you had a Bill of Rights, but the exceptions to claiming the rights were longer than the possibility of claiming the rights.
Thank you. Thank you, Father Dolan. Your thoughts?
Yes, I very much agree with what Steve has said, because I feel that, traditionally we have seen this, that the citizens have rights and the government has responsibilities. Now we're getting to the point where we recognize that even the government has rights, and institutions have rights, and citizens have responsibilities. But traditionally, it's when you're dealing with people who've been denied rights for so long and are denied freedom, then we have to put an overemphasis to get the balance right on their rights, because you can't talk to the poor who are deprived or who are in danger of their responsibilities until you guarantee them that it's safe to live in this country. Let me take, for example, we think a classic case of extrajudicial killings. The government has a right to make us feel safe. And with all the insecurity and the talk of terror, how safer we are. So, and how vulnerable are poor people in particular. To me, I feel I'd look at life from the viewpoint of victims and of the poor. So to me, I'm certainly telling the poor, you also have responsibilities, but the state has a huge obligation and has a huge backload of work to do to catch up on serving the poor in this country.
Right. I mean, that's a whole area that needs focus that Father Gabriel Dolan has opened up. But the truth is, in a highly insecure environment, people demand security. There's a lot of pressure on both sides. And, how do you achieve a balance?
I mean, I think people don't demand security, they demand safety. And safety of one's property and one's lives in a context where there is an external threat like terrorism, or an internal threat where you have sections of the society that are intolerant or violent. The state has an obligation to protect people without increasing the level of insecurity and the level of fear that the communities that they focus on. I mean, I think what we've seen in terms of the what we called Operation Usalama, which actually at some point became, in the language of the state, Operation Eastleigh Sanitization. I mean, that's the language that they used for the arrests of over 6,000 people and the deportation of about 300 people. What we've seen is a situation where the state, in response to a very frightening, clear and present danger, can actually act in a way in which it compounds the problem that is facing that community. I mean, we spent the last 10 years integrating the Somali community in business, in the politics, and what we did in about 2 months was essentially bring that community back to the place where they're not even certain they are Kenyans. They're not even certain that they have the same rights as Kenyans, and they are indistinguishable from possible terrorists. So I think this is the challenge that the state has, is how do you rise to address a really present danger, but at the same time leave people, first of all, confident and secure in the management of security affairs. But secondly, also, how do you involve the communities as your allies in this process? I mean, what we need to be doing is really creating zones of safety and a kind of civic intelligence capacity, where the security capacity comes from the community rather than relying on informers and the police force.
Powerful.
Only.
Creating safety rather than security. We had actually forgotten that word, safety. Let's talk about the situation across Africa. And we can see what's happening in Nigeria with the Boko Haram. You know, it's something that's, got cut right across Africa, because we are told they were actually trained in Sudan and Somalia and went back across. We see what's happening with Al-Shabaab in our very own region. Very real challenges around safety. And yet, we still need to respect and preserve the rights of the human beings who are involved in all these disagreements, issues, conflicts. What advice, if you were sitting with some of Africa's top leaders in a security meeting, what advice would you be giving them, Steve?
I think, first of all, something is evolving in terms of the meaning of rights in Africa, in what we're seeing in Nigeria, and of course here also in Kenya. And this is the advice that I would give to the African leadership. First, when people have felt that the way the state is made and managed does not include them, human rights have been expressed in form of subversive movements. And those subversive movements have questioned status quo, and when the state have refused to listen to the questioning in the formal spaces, then they retreat and they take resistant movements using the language of rights sometimes, and sometimes using secessionist language. And that's a major threat to the African state and African governance structure at the moment. Aligned to that is that most of the African leadership, having exhausted internal despotic mechanisms, for example, using police for extrajudicial execution or using the army, turned into private militias. In Kenya, we had what we call informal repression, when the government of Kanu and Moi realized that using the police was not effective enough. Then they had private militias which were used to oppress, to undermine, and to torture people in the perceived opposition. And that's the case in Nigeria, is a case that you see also in the background of Boko Haram and so on, and is a case that you saw here in the evolution and turning the face of Mungiki. So turning to informal repression by African leadership subsequently has produced a kind of violent and militias that we see in most parts of Africa. In Kisumu,
and once you create them, you can't just disband them.
You can't disband them. In Kisumu, you have what they call Chinese Squad and American Marines today, who a lot of theories coming through seems to associate them with the election moment of 2013. So what do you do with them after 2013? So that is very important.
So what would you tell the leaders in 30 seconds?
Well, first of all, do not recruit private militias as a tool of taking forward your informal repression. And the other one, the language of discontent, the language of democracy, when expressed in the formal space, take it more seriously. Otherwise, it will go to the back street and become a subversive language.
I think that we first acknowledge that in the last 20 years that the African continent has made significant progress in terms of democracy. Leave aside economic growth or anything else. And we have less dictatorships, more democratic institutions, more reform. So that is very positive. And what we are saying is, whatever other challenges are there now, we don't want to lose that democratic space that we've already got, because the way to progress is still freedom. Freedom and rights is the way definitely to make progress. So if you have these scares, we don't want that used as a general excuse to deny public rights. We can have inconvenience, that we have to be searched, we have to go slow, go early, traffic, all of those, because it's in the public interest. And we don't mind being inconvenienced, but we should not demonize communities, and we should also have a proper intelligence service.
Just coming back to the issue of intelligence, apparently 15 years ago, an ambassador to Sudan from Nigeria was raising questions about young Nigerians training in Sudanese camps and heading back up into Nigeria. And had they investigated that at that point and tried to establish what was going on, perhaps Boko Haram wouldn't be where it is today.
I mean, just rolling on from that comment, that point about the ambassador, there are stories of is it 15 or 12 years ago, Somali mothers begging the police in Eastleigh to arrest their sons because they did not know what their sons were doing, and they kept disappearing for long periods of time. They were getting extremely intolerant and making statements that actually were very endangering the public, and no action was really taken on that. And so we've had those warnings, but I think your point is a more general point about Africa, so maybe we should just pick up. I mean, if I had 2 minutes in front of some heads of states or leaders, I would basically have 3 points. The first is that I think, like Father Dolan has said, there has been a massive change in terms of the continent over the last 10 to 20 years, particularly the last 10 years. But still, there is a lot of neglect, a lot of kind of denial of basic dignity and basic rights to essential services. 1 in 16 women still die at childbirth. 2 out of 5 men and women die from infectious diseases. 1 in 3 children across the continent are out of school. These are really the, I guess what you'd call the drivers of the insecurity that we're seeing at the moment. So that's the first point. The development growth, the growth of development has to accelerate to be able to leave people vested in the idea of a nation state and its economy. That's the first point. Second point is that in the conversation, and we start to see this a little more, and it's very popular within the East African region, that we have to trade rapid economic growth and infrastructural growth for democratic freedoms and rights. So it started with the late Prime Minister Meles, who argued basically that an autocratic or a firm, benevolent dictator would actually create the conditions under which we would enjoy freedoms and human rights 10 years from now. I think that's a false argument, and I think it's a very dangerous argument because we don't necessarily have to trade one for the other. We can have both. And I think by having both, what you do is you give a wide majority of the society an opportunity to participate in that growth, to feel that they own the path that the country is taking.
Stay with the Africa Leadership Dialogues.
Let's hear some views, please, from our audience members.
And my worry is that there is a culture that is coming up in Kenya and many African countries that some basic rights should be attained progressively. The perception that rights are something that should be rights are compulsory things. You need them, as in, like, if you don't have these rights, you cease to be a human being. You can just be compared like any other dog surviving on the fate of the master. Rights are things that should be attained immediately, not things to be attained progressively. And this is a culture that we've been seeing, that rights are being taken as in something that will be attained progressively. When is this progressively going to be reached?
Thank you. Thank you.
I think my contribution with this, like the police force and the organs that have been charged with ensuring safety and security. From the citizen perspective, there's this idea that they're considered the otherness perspective, that we are separate from the government, we are separate from the executive, such that we view the police with a lot of suspicion, and the government and the police view the citizen with a lot of suspicion, such that when I make a claim to my right, it is seen as interfering with their use of power or their works of power. So my recommendation would be really creating these forums where citizens can really get to understand their rights and the processes through which they can interact with the government to break this specter of suspicions that surrounds the whole engagement, so that there can be clear lines of communication between the government and its citizens.
My name is Natocho Magero. On leadership, I don't think you can give what you don't have. So I think our leadership, generally also in Africa, is a reflection of who we are as a society. So I don't know if, I think the way we can deal with these issues of rights and justices is probably to change the mindset of the whole populace. I don't know how that can be possible, but if we have the same mindset, then we'll keep electing the same kind of leaders. Like if we have resources, they'll be grabbed and maybe passed down to a few. So I think we just need to change the mindset of leadership.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll come to Houghton first, because you've actually initiated a forum that brings together the security services in your area and the community. Tell us a little bit about that.
So the case in question is a part of Nairobi called Kilimani, and it has a population of 43,000 people. It is quite unique in the sense that it's just outside of the central business district, but it also has quite a diverse set of communities, both in terms of class, race, and ethnicity. And one of the things that is interesting about Kilimani is that there is a rapid growth of private investment. So we're moving from single bungalows to high-rise apartments, but it's not matched by the level of public investment. And Africa is completely familiar with this. I mean, we're seeing, cities growing dramatically, whether it be Abuja or Johannesburg or Cairo. And the question is really, how do you build inclusive cities? Cities where there are not just this surplus of labor standing on the corner waiting for jobs either to build houses or to wash cars or to fix cars or to wash clothes. But actually, how do you create an integrated economy that allows for everybody to be able to find a livelihood and to find a stake in that small zone? And for us in Kilimani, one of the things we've been looking at is how do you involve citizens and residents in the management of public safety in the area? And a simple thing. In Kilimani, because it's largely a middle-class area, every compound will have one security guard. But yet, if you walk down the streets of Kilimani after about 7 o'clock, it's very dark, the lights don't work, the public lighting system does not work, and behind every gate there is a security guard. One of the things we've been saying to residents is, why don't you ask your security guard between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. to stand outside of your gate? And you would have a whole corridor of security, so that any woman, any man, any child that's walking down that road would have security and protection for the length of that road. But because we think very small, we think very much in terms of our own compounds, we're not able to utilize that capacity effectively. And I think this is some of the things that we could be looking at. And there are other examples. I mean, I spent a weekend last weekend in Dandora, meeting with an organization called the Mustard Seed Organization. And you know the mustard seed, huh? It's a very powerful concept, both biblical and in terms of African political history. And what they've done is they've essentially mobilized courts in Dandora to reclaim the drains. Now, it sounds like a strange thing. The drains were built in the 1970s by a World Bank government program. But over the years, they've become neglected. So they have got filled up with soot and soil and so on. So you can't find the drains. So in most cases in Dandora, if you're walking down the streets, there will be sewage running down the middle of the road, right? All they did was they reached out to those communities and said, organize people in terms of courts of 200 people, and said, if you keep this maintained, what you will have access to is a playground for your children, you will have parking for your cars, and if you put a gate there, you're able to regulate the security of that area. Now, I've just seen that conversation in the space of 3 to 4 months transform courts, just one court after a time. And this Mustard Seed organization is just doing a wonderful job.
Thank you so much for that, Houghton. And I come to you, Father Dolan, with this again. And this is the importance, perhaps, of the ability to pick the paper up or not throw that paper on the ground, is that it transforms you mentally. I'm sure the people going through this process in Dandora, reclaiming those drains, is also giving them a mental evolution of sorts. What are your thoughts on this, and what have you seen, perhaps, in your environment that...
My experience is that if people are allowed and encouraged and are free to participate, they'll have a sense of ownership. So if people feel they own a community or an activity, I've seen the same in informal settlements with regards sports grounds and clearances and participation, because they have a sense of ownership. And that is what the whole rights thing is. It's about. It's like saying, this is your home, this is your country, and you're people with dignity and rights. So you have the responsibility now is, it's not like a burden, but it's a voluntary thing. We want to make a better place for our society. The difficulty has been that freedom is often denied. So if you want to set up a small business, it has been so difficult.
Such a struggle.
It's such a struggle. It's like the systems are there against you. The movement of freedom and rights is towards a system that encourages you to have more initiative and more creativity and more responsibility for your community.
And very often,
and that's where we're going. But there's a resistance, because and you can see that initiative, I would say, in terms of creativity and production. Two things: the M-Pesa thing, the growth of it.
Right.
It's found in every informal settlement. Banking is done even in banks. Always, where I live, even banks come looking for customers. Right. They know, they see the potential there. You look at it in another classic example, the growth of tuk-tuks and motorcycles. Right. It is, of course, the law regulating them is a different issue, but that creativity that you have 80,000, whatever, and it's growing all the time. So if you make the environment friendly, all the young people, I think there's such an energy in Kenya that more and more young people will see opportunities and be responsible, because they feel that sense of, we're more free, this is our place, I want to stay here, and I want to live comfortably.
And it just takes a little push.
It just a little push. No, it also means the government step back a little. It means maybe what Manu Chandari is saying is, let's have less boundaries, less obstacles, less borders, free it up.
More space.
More space. Free it up. And people do the rest themselves.
Interesting. Steve.
And indeed, it's essentially, how do you enable people to enjoy their citizenship? If you live under threat of constant eviction, you are unlikely to see that place as home, and you're unlikely to invest more there. You're unlikely to bond with it. You're unlikely to see yourself as part of a community there. And consequently, therefore, people don't see the need to invest more, to integrate more, and so on. So I think essentially, therefore, for African leadership, there are two things there. How do you give meaning of citizenship to the population beyond the ID card? And then secondly, how do you develop models of governance that integrate people rather than those that create cells that ultimately exclude a significant majority of your population who have huge potential. And that also runs on technology. M-Pesa, for example, is a very old technology of table banking. Right. In housing, we've seen when we've encouraged the urban poor to do incremental upgrading, there are better houses. So if you change the building code to allow people to do this, you achieve more, they take more responsibility, and ultimately people feel meaning of being Kenyans to be more real. And not just Kenya, you saw it in Zimbabwe. When they did the first demolition to clean so-called rubbish in Harare, there was huge uproar. But Rwanda, Kigali, had the same problem of shanties and grass-thatched houses emerging in Kigali. What did they do? They did not do a massive demolition in Kigali like was done in Harare, but they did a project asking people to visualize a new Kigali with better livelihood, with better citizens, attractive to everyone. And today, if you go to Kigali, you can't get a grass-thatched house.
Fascinating thoughts. Thank you so much. We could continue with this all day, but we've really come to the close. I want to ask you to look into the camera, please, and in 30 seconds, deliver your punchline, your message to the African leadership or citizenry on what we need to do in order to ensure that we are respecting our rights and responsibilities. Houghton, let me start with you.
So I think my message would be, what experience as leaders do you want to leave your citizens? What would be the experience of citizenship that you would want your people, those that vote for you and those that don't vote for you, to have of being part of your republic? And this is a conversation that I think can happen across the entire continent. My sense is that if you create an empowered, a confident, a responsible citizenship, then your task of managing the affairs of the state will be much easier, because I think there is only two options for many in terms of citizenship. Maybe three. One is apathetic citizenship, where they do nothing and you have to keep pushing them to do stuff. The second is active citizenship, where they're responsible and they're engaged. And the third is insurrectionist citizenship, as we've seen in some of the North African countries, where the capacity of citizens to be able to disrupt public affairs is not only very real, but is also quite costly for the state.
Thank you so much.
I believe in God. Believing in God means I believe in the people. You know, I really believe in people. And I think when I speak into the citizens first, I think young Kenyan people need to believe in their potential, their gifts, and the opportunities that are there. I think it's a wonderful time to be young. And I think the young generation in Kenya have a wonderful opportunity to change society radically and in a transformative manner. So I do think the potential is wonderful to be there. Have that confidence, that self-belief. I think the government has to free things up. Less governance will be better for Kenyans at this stage. And the whole notions of devolution is a very positive step in that direction. To extend devolution again to have more money available at local development is very, very important, but it also needs more citizens' participation in terms of accountability, but decision-making. And we're at that very difficult challenging stage of trying to get a balance between citizens' participation in the new structures of governments. But the government needs to free it up. Let people who've got rights, they're free, give them that more freedom that they can develop this country themselves.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah, I think for me, the African leadership needs to move beyond the rule of fear. After September 11 and with the ongoing threats of security and economic anxiety sometimes, there's been a resurgence of rule of fear, which I think would undermine and delete the democratic gains that have been made. So it is useful that in this era of anxiety, there should be more return to democracy rather than more return to excessiveness and coercion as a way of leadership. And to the citizens, I think, having been in South Africa at the time when xenophobia sort of took root and they saw a lot of Africans standing against their fellow Africans, we have to look for a new model of claiming our citizenship. Citizenship now can't be claimed on basis of ethnicity or basis of identity frameworks that exclude others, but perhaps more on the framework of rights. If you claim citizenship on the framework of rights, you tend to be more inclusive, you tend to be more attentive to the rights of others, and you tend to create a model of thinking and living that allows belonging for all, other than belonging for a few and exclusion of many.
Stay with the Africa Leadership Dialogues.
We're now going to get your views on the issues. Let's see what you have to say.
This week we asked you, how can African states achieve social cohesion and progress for all citizens? Abubakar Usman says, I think social cohesion and progress can be achieved across Africa if our leaders encourage social justice. Social injustice is the greatest threat to cohesion and sustainable development. Svets M says, practicing good governance, equal resource distribution and non-discrimination by state and its agents.
I think that one way in which Africa can achieve social cohesion for all citizens is that we need to understand and embrace the different ethnic groups that we have, the different cultures that we have, and the most important thing is that we need to understand each other. So for me, that is the most important thing if we're going to achieve social cohesion.
To join our conversation, go to our G+ page, Africa Leadership Dialogues, on Facebook, Africa Leadership Dialogues, on Twitter, @AfricaLD, and on WhatsApp, send your video comments to +254 715 816 033.
Remember, you can carry this conversation forward. Join us on our social media platforms. You can also go to www.samosafestival.com, where there's lots of conversations and also activities. You can participate. Get in touch. Time now for Africa's Top 10.
On Africa's Top 10 this week, we feature the most livable cities in Africa. This is according to Africa.com. Starting us off at number 10 is Kigali in Rwanda. Rwanda's capital city has seen an expansion in its infrastructure to help ease traffic congestion and is slowly becoming one of the most rapidly developing cities on the continent. Windhoek in Namibia comes in at number 9. The small but active city is home to just about every national government institution, making it the country's political, cultural, social and economic capital. Windhoek is best known for its beer, Windhoek Lager, one of the fastest growing premium beers in the region. At number 8 is Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, a rapidly growing city with an annual population growth of over 3%, making it the third fastest growing city in Africa. Dar es Salaam is the largest city in Tanzania and remains the political and economic hub of the nation. Slotted in at number 7 is Tunis in Tunisia. The former French territory has a diverse, rich culture. The old world remains alongside modern infrastructure. The Medina of Tunis is one of the first Arab Muslim towns and now is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Taking the number 6 spot is Libreville in Gabon. Modern and vibrant, the country's capital and largest city is home to just over 500,000 people, with oil as the main economic driver. The last decade has seen an increased investment in land set aside for national parks and nature reserves. Gaborone in Botswana comes in at number 5. Politically stable and economically buoyant, Botswana's capital is one of the world's largest producers of rough diamonds and is now recognized as the diamond capital of the world. The economy is also driven by its beef exports as well as a growing tourism industry. Positioned at number 4 is Johannesburg in South Africa. The city is sleek, modern and expansive and offers a wealth of stores and restaurants. Johannesburg is also an attractive base for many African companies as it provides easier access to international opportunities. Johannesburg holds the title of the largest man-made forest in the world. At number 3 is Kenya's capital, Nairobi. It is fast becoming the African city of choice for multinational companies seeking a foothold for their African operations. Housing options are affordable relative to other African cities, and the technology industry offers much promise with internet connectivity considered one of the best on the continent today. Coming in at number 2 is Accra in Ghana. Ghana's capital city is a sophisticated urban area that is home to roughly 20% of Ghana's 20 million total population. Their government is committed to investing into social and physical infrastructure. And our number 1 this week is Cape Town in South Africa. It is popular with advertising executives and creatives, with many retailers and fashion designers headquartered here. Cape Town's public transport infrastructure was given a boost primarily through the My City Rapid Bus service. The city has already won a number of prestigious international travel awards. And that's Africa's Top 10 this week.
Time to end the show now. Thank you for being with us. It's always a pleasure to have you. We end, as always, with a proverb, and this one is from Sudan. It's a challenge to all of us because I think we are all leaders in the spaces that we live in around our spheres of influence. And it goes, a large chair does not make a king. Blessings to you and blessings to Africa.